The history of the United States is rich and complex, with a timeline filled with significant events that have shaped the country as we know it today. From the arrival of the first European settlers to the founding of the nation and the struggle for civil rights. Below is a timeline highlighting some of the most important events in the country's history, from its founding to the present days. This timeline provides an overview of key events that have shaped America and its place in the world. The Declaration of Independence of the United States was a document drafted in the 1966, in which the 30 colonies declared their independence from the United Kingdom and established the principles of freedom and equality. The U.S. Constitution is the fundamental document that shows the nation's legal and political framework. It was drafted in the 1787 and shows the separation of powers between federal, state, and local governments, as well as the fundamental rights and freedom of citizens.
The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 was an historic agreement where the United States purchased a vast region of land west of the Mississippi River from France. The purchase doubled the size of the country and opened up new opportunities for westward expansion. Led by Thomas Jefferson, the acquisition strengthened American control over the territory and secured the vital trade route of the Mississippi River, making it a pivotal milestone in the history of the United States.
The U.S. acquired much of the Mexican territory in 1848, following the Mexican-American War. Mexico ceded more than a half its territory, including the present-day states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, Oklahoma, and part of Montana. Also, South Dakota and Nebraska, in exchange for $50 million.
The U.S. Civil War, which took place from 1861 to 1865, was a devastating conflict between the northern states, known as the Union, and the southern states, known as the Confederates, over issues like slavery, states' rights, and economic differences. The war resulted in approximately 620,000 deaths and had a profound impact on the nation. The Union's victory led to the abolition of slavery with the passage of the 13th Amendment, and it reinforced the federal government's authority over the states. The Civil War marks a critical chapter in American history, shaping the nation's identity and paving the way for a more unified and equal society. Plessy versus Ferguson was a landmark U.S. Supreme Court case in 1896 that upheld racial segregation in public facilities under the doctrine of separate but equal. The case centered around Homer Plessy, an African American who challenged segregation on a train in Louisiana. The court's decision affirmed the constitutionality of segregation laws, allowing states to maintain separate facilities for different races as long as they were considered equal. This ruling further entrenched racial discrimination and laid the legal groundwork for the Jim Crow era of segregation in the United States, which endured for decades. It wasn't until the landmark case of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 that the separate but equal doctrine was overturned, leading to the desegregation of public schools and initiating a new chapter in the flight of civil rights.
In 1920, a significant milestone was achieved in the United States as the 19th Amendment was ratified, granting women the right to vote. This hard fought victory marked the culmination of decades of relentless activism and determination by suffragists. The amendment symbolized a major stride towards gender equality, empowering women to participate in the democratic process and have a voice in shaping the nation's future. The legacy of this transformative movement continues to inspire and remind us of the importance of equal rights and representation for all citizens. During the early 20th century, the United States witnessed a turbulent era known as Prohibition, which lasted from 1920 to 1933. The 18th Amendment banned the production, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages, aiming to address social issues caused by excessive alcohol consumption. However, prohibition led to a rise in organized crime and illegal bootlegging. Ultimately, the widespread discontent with the law and its unintended consequences prompted its repeal with the 21st Amendment, ending prohibition and allowing the legal sale and consumption of alcohol once again. The Great Depression, spanning from 1929 to the late 1930s, was an unprecedented economic crisis that engulfed the United States. It was triggered by the stock market crash of 1929, leading to the widespread unemployment, business failures, and severe poverty. Millions of Americans lost their jobs and homes, facing dire hardships. Government interventions through programs like the New Deal sought to provide relief and recovery. The Great Depression reshaped the nation's economic policies, leaving a lasting impact on society and underscoring the importance of financial regulation and social safety nets.
World War II was one of the most important events in human history. The United States' impact on World War II was immense. The country entered the war in late 1941 after a Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and quickly became a major supplier of weapons and other materials to the Allies. The US also played a decisive role in the defeat of both Germany and Japan. The country also provided billions of dollars in economic aid to the Allies and helped to rebuild Europe after the war. The US also played a lead role in the creation of the United Nations, which was designed to prevent future wars. After World War II came the Cold War. The Cold War was a war between the US and the Soviet Union, where both sides were technically at peace, however, they participated in an aggressive arms race, proxy war, ideological bids for world dominance, and espionage. During this time, the imminent threat of the next nuclear attack kept everybody alarmed. This war was the battle to be the most dominant and influential superpower in the world at the time, and it ended with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991.
The civil rights movement in the United States was a transformative struggle for racial equality and justice that gained momentum in the 1950s and 1960s. Led by influential figures like Martin Luther King Jr., it sought to end racial segregation and discrimination. Tragically, on April 4, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, causing profound grief and outrage. His death galvanized the movement, leading to the eventual passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This landmark legislation outlawed segregation and discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, marking a significant step towards a more equal and inclusive society.
The Vietnam War took place between 1955 and 1975. It was fought by the communists of North Vietnam against the government of South Vietnam, supported by the United States. The war ended by the communist victory and the reunification of Vietnam under the communist regime.
On November 22, 1963, a tragic event shook the United States when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. He was riding in a motorcade when shots were fired, fatally wounding him. The assassination of his charismatic and visionary leader stunned the nation and the world, sparking widespread grief and conspiracy theories. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the assassination but was killed 2 days later before facing trial. The loss of President Kennedy left an indelible mark on American history, and his legacy continues to resonate to this day. On July 20th, 1969, the United States achieved an incredible milestone when the Apollo 11 mission successfully landed on the moon. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took humanity's first steps on the lunar surface, with Armstrong famously stating, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The moon landing was a testament to human determination, scientific progress, and international cooperation. It inspired generations and stands as a symbol of humanity's ability to overcome challenges and explore the unknown.
The Watergate scandal in the 1970s was a political crisis that led to President Richard Nixon's resignation. It involved a break in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters ordered by Nixon's administration, revelation of cover ups, abuse of power, and illegal activities through investigations by the media, and Congress ultimately exposed the corruption. The scandal eroded public trust in the government and marked a significant turning point in American politics, leading to increased media scrutiny and reforms to prevent further abuses of power. The Shuttle Challenger explosion occurred on January 28 of 1986, when the NASA shuttle disintegrated just 73 seconds after liftoff, tragically killing all seven crew members on board. The disaster was caused by the failure of an ore-rising seal in one of the solid rocket boosters, which was exacerbated by cold weather conditions. The Challenger disaster deeply affected the nation and the space program, leading to a temporary suspension of shuttle flights and a thorough investigation. Lessons learned from this tragedy have since contributed to enhancing safety protocols and improving space exploration.
The Monica Lewinsky affair was a political scandal that took place during the second term of the President Bill Clinton. Lewinsky was a White House intern with whom Clinton had an extramarital affair. The affair was exposed, leading to a major political scandal and Clinton's impeachment by the House of Representatives.
The September 11 attack was one of the biggest events in US history. That day, almost 3,000 people died and millions of others were left terrorized and devastated. It was a terrorist attack on the US orchestrated by Osama bin Laden's terrorist organization. This event changed the world forever, as the US government created the Department of Homeland Security and the Patriot Act was passed, which expanded the government's surveillance powers, and this led to an increase in security in airports all around the world, and the beginning of the War on Terror, which to this day has very complex consequences.
The Iraq War in the 2000s began in 2003 with the invasion of Iraq led by a coalition of countries, including the United States. The war based on the belief that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, which later proved to be inaccurate. The conflict resulted in the toppling of Saddam Hussein's regime, but also led to a prolonged and complex insurgency. The war had significant human and financial costs, impacting the region's stability and international relations. It remains a contentious topic with lasting consequences, shaping U.S. foreign policy and military interventions in subsequent years.
Osama bin Laden, the founder and leader of the terrorist organization Al Qaeda, was killed by US Navy SEALs in a covert operation in Abbottabad, Pakistan in 2011. The operation was authorized by the President Barack Obama and was a major victory in the war on terror.
The Edward Snowden leak is one of the biggest scandals in recent US history. Snowden worked for various government agencies as an IT system expert for 9 years until 2013, where he fled the country and revealed numerous global surveillance programs. This event changed how Americans viewed the US government, as it confirmed the fact that the government was spying on them. Snowden was later charged with espionage, however, he now lives in Russia. The COVID 19 pandemic was the first pandemic in more than 100 years. This event put the world on lockdown, which was the first time this had ever happened in the post globalization era. One of the most affected countries was the US, which had its stock market crash, their unemployment rates went through the roof, companies reported record losses, and it cost the US government more than $14 trillion. The Black Lives Matter protests were a series of protests that took place in the United States and around the world in 2020, following the murder of George Floyd by police in Minneapolis. The protests were initially in response to Floyd's death, but they soon expanded to address the broader issue of police brutality and systematic racism against black people in the United States. The BLM protests were met with support and also backlash. However, they had a significant impact on American society and the world, with multiple groups of people in other countries joining the movement. Now, to conclude, the US has a very broad history and it has had many important events that have changed the course of history. It is also evident that the US have a huge impact not only on a national level but also on a global scale. US history has been very influential ever since their independence. This speaks greatly on the power they have as a nation. Thank you.